While some video games are probably made totally independent of what gamers may want them to be, it's fair to assume most developers like to give gamers what they want, at least most of the time. Now let's discuss the elephant in the room because of my title here before we go any further. We are of course talking about the fan service where developers do something nice for the gamers and give them what they think they want. Not the other kind of fan service, get your heads out of the gutter. Whether it's fan favorite mechanics, storylines, returning characters, or side quests, there are loads of examples of times developers have gone out of their way to provide moments of pure fan service. Even when it meant bending the format, pacing, or design philosophy of the rest of the game, these were 10 occasions that we were more than happy to be catered to. I'm Jess from WhatCulture, and here are the 10 best fan service moments in video games. Number 9. Returning to Anor Londo, Dark Souls 3. It might seem like From Software hates you if you're only factoring in the amount of times you're inevitably dying in their games, but Soulsborne games actually have a ton of fan service. From returning characters to satisfying quest lines and delightful Easter eggs, there's plenty to find here for the intrepid fan service explorer. One great example is the inclusion of Anor Londo in Dark Souls 3. For the uninitiated, Anor Londo is a gorgeous city first seen in the original Dark Souls game. The legendary City of the Gods made a return in Dark Souls 3 to the joy of many fans, especially given how faithful it stayed to its initial iteration. That is, accepting the fact that Gwendolyn is no longer here to maintain it, so it's a shadow of what it once was. Even though there's relatively little to do in the area, save for a big boss fight, it's a really lovely bit of nostalgic exploration for fans of the original Dark Souls game. Number 8. Exploring Solstheim and Dragon Riding, The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim Dragonborn DLC. If you're old enough to be a fan of Morrowind, then the Dragonborn DLC for Skyrim was pretty much designed to make you happy. Or if you played through Skyrim and just really wanted to ride a dragon, then it's for you too. The Dragonborn DLC let players explore Solstheim, an area that old school fans haven't been able to visit since the Blood Moon expansion to Morrowind, which, if you need reminding, came out way back in 2002. It was the perfect inclusion since the island is situated between Skyrim and Morrowind. Of course, time has changed it considerably, but there's so many new areas to explore, enemies to encounter, and intricate quests to take on. The DLC is clearly designed to please fans, from its setting to its new dragon riding mechanic, which will take a little legwork to obtain but is so worth doing. Dragonborn is a love letter to Elder Scrolls fans through and through, but when the fan service is this good, how can we complain? Number 7. Rex vs. Ray, Metal Gear Solid 4 Guns of the Patriots. There's an argument to be made here that Metal Gear Solid 4 is the reigning champion of fan service and how to do it right. The grand conclusion of Solid Snake's journey is handled with such expertise and intensity that it's no wonder the game nails its subtle and not so subtle nods to fans just as well. The game is riddled with returning fan favorite characters like Otacon and Eva. There are a number of epic showdowns fans had been waiting for, the ending is flawless, and the return to Shadow Moses Island in its entirety is very cool. We're honing in on one particular moment in that sequence though, and that's Snake and Liquid facing off while operating Metal Gear Rex and Metal Gear Ray respectively. This is actually the only time you get to completely control an actual Metal Gear in the entire series, so, you know, enjoy it. The fight is epic as all get out, as you'd expect given you're housed in an enormous mech fighting another mech. The conclusion with Raiden is also really cool. The entire encounter was designed to make fans happy who'd been wishing for a Rex vs. Ray standoff, and it absolutely succeeded. Number 6. The Party, Mass Effect 3 Citadel DLC. This is another case where I'm inclined to just include the entire DLC for this entry, but I'm pretty sure if you played the entire Mass Effect trilogy and played the Citadel DLC, I think you'd understand. There's so much to love in this DLC that's entirely designed to give you more time and opportunities to spend with Mass Effect's fantastically realized and charming suite of characters. Whether lost love interests, shipmate besties, or returning characters from old entries, every moment of this DLC is a delight. That said, I'm gonna have to pick the party as the highlight. Here you can interject yourself with random groups of your pals, hear their chatter amongst each other, and watch Tali get wasted again because that's never not enjoyable. You can even wake up with your loved one in the morning after the party, unless you're like me and you romance Thane, in which you get a really sad video and wake up alone. No regrets. Number 5. Zombie Chronicles, Call of Duty Black Ops 3. It will come as no surprise to anyone even remotely familiar with Call of Duty that the Zombies modes were kind of a smash hit with fans. Though there were a lot of happy campers and those with a different playstyle preference when Call of Duty Black Ops 3 Zombie Chronicles was announced. A collection of 8 remastered Zombies maps from World at War all the way up to Black Ops 2. Fans got to relive the maps in lovely HD and the community absolutely loved it. This is a perfect example of a dedicated audience getting exactly what they've been asking for, and since there are a good handful of players who prefer the Zombies maps over other elements of COD, this was a super welcome addition. In fact, fans are already clamoring for Zombie Chronicles 2, with Treyarch lead game designer Kevin Drew encouraging fans to keep asking for it so they can make it. Number 4. Talking Roach, The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt Blood and Wine DLC. Now, The Witcher is a lot like Metal Gear here, in that we're talking about these really rich, dense, lore-heavy series, and so their final entries are of course rife with fan service. Which is a great thing as a fan of a really cool franchise, but a tricky thing to boil down to just one fantastic moment, though there seems to be one quest every Witcher 3 fan remembers most fondly from the Blood and Wine DLC, and that's the one where Roach talks. Geralt's faithful steed Roach is by his side every step of the way. Sure, sometimes she gets stuck on a fence or a house, but she does her best to get you where you need to be and hold your gross monster trophies, so most fans bonded anyway. As a result, fans couldn't help but love the equine Phantoms quest, where Geralt drinks a strange concoction and then gets to have an actual conversation with Roach. The interactions are genuinely very funny, and it's a gleeful moment for fans who spent at minimum the entirety of Witcher 3 with their horse pal, or perhaps the entire series. Geralt even brings up how Roach can cross the entire ocean when he calls sometimes, but also sometimes gets caught up on fences. It's actually kinda sad when the quest ends and you can't talk with Roach anymore. Then Roach inevitably gets stuck on a piece of scenery and it gets less sad. Or was that just me? Number 3. Back to the Ishimura, Dead Space 2. Dead Space is a horror institution for good reason. It's extraordinarily atmospheric, strikes the perfect balance between action and tension, and has a rich and chilling narrative. The first game takes place on the USG Ishimura, an interstellar mining ship that became riddled with monsters called necromorphs. There's a lot to go over here, so let's just say by the end, shit goes down and our hero appears to escape. That is until the events of Dead Space 2, which takes place 3 years later, and in one particular chapter, our hero needs to go back to the spaceship hellhole. There's a couple of dual things served by this. For one, it's absolutely terrifying, for you and Isaac. The memory of what went down and the agonizing slow pace before foes start appearing is video game tension at its best. It's also incredibly cool to come back to the dreaded location as a fan of the first game, especially given the sequel's updated visuals, so everything that was already pretty tense and scary is now extremely tense and scary. This fan service moment proves you just can't have too much of a good thing, and the entire return to the USG Ishimura is handled so perfectly, as long as you don't scare too easy. Number 2. Old Friends, Yakuza Like a Dragon. I really wanted to include this one because it's definitely one of my favorite video game fan service moments in recent memory, but it is a bit of a spoiler, so if you haven't played Yakuza Like a Dragon and don't want to know one of the cool reveals, this is your opportunity to nope out and meet us over at number 1. Yakuza Like a Dragon is the most recent entry in the long-running Yakuza franchise, and even though it changed out series staple protagonist Kazuma Kiryu for newcomer Ichiban Kasuga, it's equally fantastic. If you missed our old friends from the previous games though, don't worry because they're not exactly gone. If you've played any Yakuza game, you know this franchise loves itself some fan service and consistently delivers on what the people want. So maybe it should have come as no surprise that Kazuma Kiryu does show up in Yakuza Like a Dragon. Not only that, you'll have to fight him, and the conflict has a delightful ending where Kasuga imagines Kiryu as a mighty dragon, and it turns out Kasuga got stopped. Majima also rocks up, and later on in the game you're able to call on each of them as summons, which is really cool. As an old school fan who spent a chunk of Like a Dragon really missing Kiryu, even though Like a Dragon is excellent on its own, this was really exciting. Number 1. That Weapon, God of War 2018. Now I've put this one all the way up at number 1 for a couple of reasons. The first being, it might be the best example of fan service handled perfectly in any game ever. And number 2, it's a huge spoiler. So if you haven't played God of War 2018 and you don't want to know one of the coolest things that happens in the game, nope out now and we're good to go. A serious contender for the moment on this list, most likely to give you chills, the sequence where Kratos must retrieve the Blades of Chaos from the chest underneath his home and the fight afterwards is almost unwatchably good. It's just perfect. From the setup where Freya asks Kratos if he has a weapon he can use in hell and he just says he needs to return home, to the way he tugs on his bandages and the way the blades light up when he picks them up, Kratos' acceptance of who he is and the carnage that follows is especially satisfying. The amount of epic here cannot be overstated. It's a fantastic moment in a fantastic game, and it manages to toe the line in providing that delightful fan service without breaking the tone of the game. That's the end of our list, but let me know down in that comment section what video game has your favorite moment of fan service. As always, I've been Jess from WhatCulture. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. If you like, you can come hang out with me on my Twitter account where I'm at Jess McDonald, but make sure you stay tuned to us here for plenty more gaming goodness.